before Sam Raimi put his absolutely wonderful touches on the Spider-Man franchise. He got to create his own, I call this a superhero movie, but this is such an incredible blend of, you can say superhero stories, but I would even go further back and just say pulp comic book stories with the classic universal monster horror ethos.
It should come as no surprise to anyone that we really like Darkman, and so for the next 45 minutes or so, you will hear us extol the virtues of a movie we really enjoy.
Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Dietsch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision.
GenreVision is a weekly movie club where we discuss horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more.
And we continue March Madness, our entire month devoted to mad scientists, with a superhero horror movie, Darkman, directed by the one, the only, Sam Raimi.
Yes, so it's a universal monster horror film where the monster is a mad scientist, so kind of an Invisible Man sort of type. That definitely takes cues from the Invisible Man look with the bandages. It takes cues from the Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera, obviously in design of the character and creating this incredible silhouette with the hat and the collar and the cloak and all of that. It has a classic female romantic character, but I feel like they paid special attention to the romance in these. Often in those Universal monster movies, it was just kind of like, yeah, there's the leading lady, and often she's going to be just that. And that blended with comic book storytelling and German expressionism, like this is all a really hyper potent mix of what we love about movies. So that's not to say that the movie is perfect. We really, really like this movie, and Drew and I certainly differ in our opinions on certain things. But overall, like this is, I think, if you were to distill like what is a GenreVision movie, like this is it.
It's on our shelf. When we were watching it, you made a really good point that this is such an easy movie to watch. And I think sometimes with that kind of language, people can feel like you're being dismissive, like there isn't a whole lot going on. It's absolutely not the case with Darkman, certainly from a filmmaking standpoint.
Right. It's not an idle movie. You can't sit idly by with this movie because it's very engaging. Now, I can definitely see, like, if you really love a movie, no matter how engaging that movie is, you can sit in the background with it on and have it on just, to keep you company and keep you comfortable. That's what so many people and so many of us do with movies and TV anyway. But I found this to be like a really attention demanding experience. And that's one of the reasons I don't like to rewatch movies a ton, is like, I want to give this my full attention. It's awesome, super fun, wastes very little time, if any at all.
I think if we had an episode to devote to just one aspect of Darkman, we could only talk about one thing. I would want to talk about the edit on this movie, because there was a point where I told you, hey, Travis, there's less than 30 minutes left, and you were gobsmacked that it had gone by so fast.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It's not a long movie. It's pretty short. But one of the things that Drew and I really dislike about movies that, either just didn't work well with test audiences or didn't play well with studio executives is they just cut the hell out of them so that nobody is bored. The movie is always just slamming transitions and cuts and everything in your face and, patching things over with poorly re-recorded lines of dialogue to make sure that everything is moving at a pace that will just astound you. And it never fixes a shitty movie. However, this movie has that sort of sense and brevity and motion, but instead of feeling like everything is cut way too short, it feels like moments here last as long as they need to have the desired impact. Nothing is blunted by the cuts made in this movie. And there are some times in this movie where like, oh, that was an apparent cut. Like there's a chunk of material missing from the movie. And we'll get to that. But, with the opening in this flick, we're immediately plunged into this situation where we're seeing two seemingly opposing groups of organized crime goons. There's a dude named Eddie Black who is a really fantastic sort of character actor role. And they're, meeting at the docks, the warehouse, because like, that's where shit goes down in movies like this.
Classic.
And it feels like, you and I had the same note, it felt like a big warehouse scene in John Woo's Hard Boiled.
Well, we're going to get to it because we've done the movie Hard Target on this show. You should go listen to our Hard Target episode. that was John Woo's first stateside American movie, and Sam Raimi was a producer on it. And I'm so glad that we did Hard Target before doing Darkman, not really intending this, but upon seeing it, it is so clear that Raimi found a deep love of Hong Kong action cinema of the 80s and early 90s and began to integrate it into this era of his filmmaking, particularly for this movie being an action movie. He really wanted to emulate that style. So immediately when this kicks off, when these two groups of gangsters show up and shit goes down, because that's where it's going to go down, and we have a guy with a wooden leg who is hiding a machine gun inside it. After there's I love this opening because it immediately sells you and tells you this is comic book. This is every stereotype you come to expect from these stories. We know it. We are going to embrace it. We're going to have fun with it, so that when all the goons have to get searched for weapons and they're tossing out nunchucks and knuckle dusters and knives and stuff,
yeah,
it's a Looney Tunes moment.
That one shot that is moving across the ground as all these different weapons fall into frame. You know, it's like, it is an absolute Looney Tunes moment. It's like, you know, Bugs Bunny or Wile E. Coyote pulling all the things out of the Acme parachute pack, everything but a parachute. Reminds me a little bit of Roger Rabbit, you know. Mm-hmm. It's beautifully executed. It's funny. It's knowingly funny, and I think that's something that people don't quite understand about Sam Raimi, who are maybe a little bit younger than us or new to his content, or maybe were introduced to him through the Spider-Man movies. It's like he's in on the joke. So
Always.
you don't need to approach this with any sense of ironic appreciation, like, oh, this is silly or goofy or silly, folks. He knows. So,
he likes it.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Embrace that fact. If you want to see a more serious Sam Raimi movie, they are out there. Watch Simple Plan.
Oh my God, don't watch A Simple Plan. It's too serious. It's devastatingly serious.
It's a pretty damn good movie, though.
But it's a very good movie, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. But in these few minutes, like you said, this kind of traffics in certain stereotypes and archetypes, and some of them are just simply outdated. You know, what we know about certain characters, you know, races and things like that. There are just some things that are going to play as dated, and that's going to come with the territory.
And appropriately so. I mean, this is, again, by drawing upon such archetypical constructs for this kind of a comic book story, it ends up, especially considering the time that this was made, that you're going to have a black character whose name is Eddie Black. It's like, oof, that's hard. And then you're going to have the Chinese mob leader whose name is Hung Fat. It's
sure.
like, look, this is
Eddie Black character. Like, that could have been written totally colorblind, but I really do love the guy they cast on. His name is Jesse Lawrence Ferguson. So he gets only a couple minutes of screen time, but he makes an impression as this disposable crime lord, you know, and just the subversion of that moment where it's like the last thing you think of is that a guy with a prosthetic leg is going to whip his prosthesis off and reveal it to be a submachine gun. It's like, oh, we are quickly in Silly Town. So it's a real strong mood setter and a big indicator of just what things are going to come. Now, it should be said that I think one of the only reasons Darkman was made at all was Tim Burton's Batman film, because there is plenty in common with, you know, between those two films, Batman and Darkman.
Unquestionably, to the point that they share the same composer.
Composers, yeah. Danny Elfman and Shirley Walker worked on the music for this movie, and ooh, the music's good.
So good.
It's going to sound very, very familiar if you like Elfman's Batman stuff, though. It's super familiar.
It's going to sound familiar if you like Elfman in general. You're going to hear a lot of do 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 do. Yeah. La 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 la. Like all that kind of stuff is there. But the main Darkman motif, I love it so much. It's
great.
So good. And I love that the movie opens not with this scene, but with a weird formalist, surrealist imagery of this like smoke that's being, reflected. So it's like a Rorschach thing. And we just hear that music first. Then we get this opening scene where we meet our head crime boss, Robert Durant, played by the always welcome Larry Drake.
Yes, for sure.
So cool in this moment. And again, it's over the top, but violent and imposing, in which he is going to chop off a guy's fingers with his cigar cutter. And the script here is just all sorts of wonderful. Like, I have 3 points, 1, click, take a finger, 2, click, take a finger, 3. I got 7 more points. Like, it's beautiful pulp dialogue.
Now, Larry Drake is the dude who played Dr. Giggles. So, there's a certain kind, I think, of performance you expect from Larry Drake, but this movie doesn't just do the goofy stuff. It really does serve to make him kind of intimidating. And it's probably my favorite role of his.
Oh, unquestionable. I would not even, there is like minor stuff I could pull upon. He was so good in this that they're like, we have to bring him back for the direct-to-video sequel and make him put him on the poster. He's that good.
Yeah, and he explodes in this movie. So that we're like, yeah, we're going to have to retcon something.
Yeah, we got to bring him back. Larry's way too good to waste on just one movie.
Yeah.
So this opening happens, and then we get the opening credits, which again is this beautiful, just surreal. God, I miss title sequences so much.
Yeah, me too, man.
It just sets the mood. The Danny Elfman score kicks in, and it's just like, yes, yes. And then we meet who will eventually be our mad scientist, Peyton Westlake, played by none other than Liam Neeson.
Also a protagonist. He's our protagonist. He's our monster. He is our operatically, sort of classically tragic hero.
He's a wonderful murderer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there is a sort of element of like a Byronic hero to him as well.
Yes.
And that mad scientist aspect really evokes certain elements of Cronenberg's The Fly and also The Fly 2. So all things that we like. You can easily see why this would really play well to a couple of guys like us, considering our tastes. But Neeson, at the time, this was 1990. This was kind of an odd role for him. This is before he was typecast as like Mr. Badass, problem solver man.
And this is before Rob Roy, I believe.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Yes.
Yeah, which was a big awareness point for him as far as being a prestige actor and all this kind of stuff. Darkman, I mean, I don't think he probably played a role like this until he came around to playing Qui-Gon Jinn. Being something this hard, like so very out of his kind of expected wheelhouse. Like now we see Liam Neeson as this, joke. And I'm not saying this is somebody, I really like Liam Neeson, but he has become a gag of sorts to be like, yeah, it's another Liam Neeson Taken ripoff starring Liam Neeson.
Sure, it's going to be a Jean Collet Serra or an Olivier Megaton movie, and it's going to be like a really crummy action junk movie.
Walk Among the Tombstones.
Yeah, I mean, but this is, to put things in perspective, this is 3 years before Schindler's List. So this was before Liam Neeson became this like expected sort of prestige actor. I'm not trying to disparage him by saying like he wasn't at all capable of prestige at the time, but what I really love about this role is he seems to know exactly what the role calls for as far as how crazy to go with it, how silly it really is, but also how like sad and tragic it should be. Like he does treat it, I think, with the attention it deserves as a role. That means going to the extreme sometimes of the silliness.
I think considering he has to play a majority of the movie under makeup and then under bandages hiding that makeup, he does a phenomenal job of selling this character as a tragic, classic universal monster. He's so good in this. And what I really love is that, like you're saying, he gets it. I didn't get the sense that it's like he's the only one taking this seriously while everybody else is goofing off. He gets the correct energy and clear. And if this apocryphal trivia is true, he really got into the role. He had a big say on the costume that Darkman chose. Like he was very particular about how he wanted to look. He apparently was the one that chose the cloak, the big coat.
So he was the Claude Rains fetishist.
Yes, exactly. And more power to him, because it is very clear that Universal knew, especially post Batman, how they wanted to market this. If you look at the early posters and everything, it was all centered around who is Darkman.
Right.
And they didn't show him. But then you look at that gorgeous painted poster of Darkman where he is just standing up, and it is like they knew that this is the image. This is the thing. In the same way that Batman was able to sell itself on practically nothing more than a symbol, this was selling Darkman on what's right there in the title. This is Darkman, and you're going to want to see this guy.
They really wanted to sell it basically on silhouette alone, because you couldn't sell it on, the star power of Liam Neeson and Frances McDormand at the time. Now, you can obviously sell a movie on their star power today. That's, for as far as today's movies are concerned, relatively easy because they're huge commodities and huge stars. But at the time, to most Americans, they were relative unknowns. And so in retrospect, having these two people cast in this movie really ages the movie very well. I think it puts a really unique and different spin on the film because you're not expecting these two characters to play in this movie. It is really surprising. And I do wish, one of my few complaints about the movie is I do wish Frances McDormand's character got more, not just screen time, but a little further integration into what was going on. There is part of the plot where she becomes intertwined with the big capitalist bad of the movie who's trying to develop this certain urban area and is involved with organized crime.
Delta City.
Yes, Delta City. And so he wants to be involved with her romantically, but there's only one scene of that later on when, Westlake confronts her after having this like tragic accident that we'll talk about. Like,
it's not an accident. It's an attempted murder.
That's true. Yeah. After this horrible assassination attempt, rather, he comes to her and she says, "Oh yeah, there was this other guy." And, there's really never a sense that she's ever conflicted about that because she's just so earnestly wanting Westlake back in her life. And I like that. The character seems to be a genuinely good person from the start. She's this attorney who wants to do good in the world and they have a really sweet relationship. Like our introduction to their relationship is them just lying on the couch together in each other's arms and looking at old photographs of them. And it's like, oh, Frances McDormand is a little kid and Liam Neeson is a little, young dude in Ireland. It's like, oh, these are sweet photos. And it really shortcuts the sentimentality and feeling like, oh, these two people belong together. It's a great scene.
I think it's the reason you have to cast people like Frances McDormand and Liam Neeson when you make these kind of movies, because that scene, as written, I think is very good shorthand and very well, but it's their performance that really, as soon as you meet them, it's like, yep, I believe these people as a couple. I believe they are deeply in love. I don't really need much more beyond that, but as the movie progresses and it wants to complicate the relationship between them, particularly from Frances McDormand's character, Julie, from her perspective, I do think that as written, she does get the short shrift. Now, I think she was probably always going to, because the kind of archetype that she's playing here is a very Vicky Vale, Lois Lane. She's investigating some bigger problem to the story that eventually the hero is going to be dealing with.
Right. But she's not like Jennifer Jason Leigh's character in The Hudsucker Proxy, for instance, where there is that Lois Lane type, but there's something else going on with that character that makes her way more important and way more interesting.
Sure. But I think we can talk, because I will agree that that's one of the major criticisms I have of the movie. But the MacGuffin of this is that there is this memorandum that shows that there have been bribes paid to certain officials, that Louis Strack is the character's name, this developer played by Colin Friels. And he has gotten in with organized crime, and he's telling her, look, you want to forget this memo. You just leave it here and walk away and it'll disappear and everything will be fine, because Robert Durant is this organized crime guy and he's into property. And if you don't do this, he's going to come after you.
Right.
And so eventually Robert Durant does come after this memo, but believes it is at the laboratory of Peyton, who has been working on a synthetic skin that he's trying to perfect. It's essentially, he's like the first 3D printer.
Right. He wants to be able to print synthetic skin for people who have, debilitating wounds to their skin and scarring, things like that, to be able to help people. That's his whole thing. And the aesthetic of this lab, oh gosh, it's like one part, Frankenstein's laboratory. And then you can definitely see some prototype stuff for what Raimi would do with Willem Dafoe's character in Spider-Man.
I was going to say, what it really is echoing is, I just thought of this. It's the same destroyed lab thing from Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock.
Yeah, also very true.
Yeah, he goes back to his destroyed lab, and it's the same kind of big gothic monster arena. And of course, again, can't deny the influence of Batman. Like, this is the Batcave for Darkman.
Sure.
And there is a great shot when he first shows back up to his burned lab, and he's standing there on the little catwalk, and he just goes, home. And then, because Sam Raimi loves John Woo, he pulls out and we just see a bunch of unmotivated birds fly in front of the screen. It's great. I love it.
The big crane shot that has Westlake entering his old bombed out lab is one of my favorite shots in the film because it reveals scope and scale slowly, and it never ever reads like the character just standing in a big void. It really does, even though it might be a smaller space than we're used to seeing in a lot of today's contemporary action films, it comes across as large because it's real. Even though it doesn't stretch on and on into infinity, I really love the tactility of it. It really does feel like a place this character might inhabit. Well, he creates this huge fire. There's this shot where he throws this like lit, wad of newspaper into this like giant furnace, and so the place is always fire lit, and it looks incredible. It's just incredible.
It's his Gothic castle. It's his bat cave. And what I like is a term that Travis and I aren't really into is when people describe like a place or a location is basically a character in the movie. And it's like, no, it's a place.
Yeah, it's a setting. Thank you.
But what it can be is a reflection of the character. And that's what this set does in this moment is like, this set is burned down and broken and decimated, just like the man that we're following.
Right. Almost every prop that we get a close up of in this location is melted and burned.
Yes, and this movie does such a great job with the brevity of making this such a sympathetic character, because when Robert Durant shows up and ends up blowing up the lab and horribly scarring Peyton, and he is launched from this giant explosion.
Oh my God.
The river.
Like John McClane at the end of Die Hard 2, just woof, rocketed up through this ball of fire.
Better than that moment. Better than that.
Man.
It's so awesome.
I will say the compositing is better in Die Hard 2, but that's because they had fucking Rennie Harlan shooting that.
Yeah, and probably, whatever, 50, 60, 70 million dollars as opposed to this.
Yeah, exactly. But it's incredible, the shot of Neeson's burning body, screaming burning body, rocketing up into the sky and falling into the adjacent harbor. I love it. And there is this wonderful hospital scene where we get some cameos from some familiar faces, including Sam Raimi, Jenny Agutter from American Werewolf in London, and also John Landis, the noted director of such films as American Werewolf in London and Blues Brothers and other such things.
Well, and this is the turn of the origin, because our original origin is like, Peyton Westlake was a scientist trying to perfect the perfect synthetic skin. But after a confrontation with the mob left him horribly scarred. He survived, but what was really left of him? Like, and right. This is what was left of him. This could
easily be a villain origin story.
This is Swamp Thing. This is the original Swamp Thing story, like to a beat.
Another Byronic hero.
Yep, and what the origin ends up being is that he fell into the river. He is assumed dead. And to speak to the brevity of this movie and probably how it affected Frances McDormand's character, as she is standing outside about to walk into the lab and answer Peyton's earlier proposal of marriage, the lab explodes. And there is a shot of her looking up at the lab, and she is then composited. There's a composite background. And as she's looking up at the lab, she then starts to turn her head down, and it shifts into her being at Peyton's grave.
Yeah, they dissolve. There's one shot of Frances McDormand looking up at the burned building, and it was shot against a green screen. And then they dissolve her in her funereal garb with I think a bouquet of flowers, and she's looking down. And then behind her, the background that they've composited in dissolves from the harbor background to the graveyard background. And it, again, like you're talking about, that transition, even though it lasts a good long time, actually covers scenes worth of time. I think it was way more elegant to do it that way. Yeah, you certainly could have done it with a jump cut, but what I love about it eschewing those kinds of beats is that the movie is able to accomplish things in a way that is just a little bit off from what you might expect. Many times we expect a cut to a graveyard scene where it's raining and everybody has black umbrellas, and it's like, no, we can do this a bit more creatively.
Well, especially because Sam Raimi is somebody who loves, respects, and understands the unique language of popular American comic book storytelling. Like, he understands how these are powerful images and how they are able to manipulate time in very unique ways.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way Dave Gibbons draws match frames.
Yes, great example. And what I like about these more formalist approaches is that it really kind of harkens more to what I think of when I think of comic book imagery as illustrated on the page. And I think that's something Sam Raimi really respects and wants to try and translate in some way to film. And this is an example of that. And there are many others. Anytime he gets to do a montage, that's coming.
Yeah. Raimi, from the standpoint of an editor, is a really cool fellow to examine. In his montages, he exemplifies what is possible when you think non-linearly. It's not just about linear time progressing forward. This, then this, then this. It's about a phantasmagorical melding of images, this over this, but this meaning this, images melding into a certain meaning, but then shifting, very dreamlike. But also, I think, jarring in a way, because we're not using those kinds of techniques in contemporary blockbuster cinema at all.
No,
I think people look at them in the Spider-Man movies and go, "This is goofy."
Yeah, I don't think they have the right basis of appreciation for it, because it's so. I mean, to be fair, these kind of formalist tendencies have never really caught on in general for populist filmmaking. But they have plenty of precedent in classic films as well. I mean, one of my favorite formalist ideas that I've talked about is the montage of bars, where a character is walking and you just see all the different neon signs of bars floating by them. It's a joke, but like that illustrates to me, it's like that is a formalist idea that people understand. And Raimi does that in this, where it's like,
you're talking about the Hudsucker Proxy, by the way, where Tim Robbins is walking past all the bars.
Well, that is not the first movie.
But
to
also
ever do
Raimi
that.
had a hand in that. But I know exactly what you're talking about. Another example would be, Jimmy Stewart's head against that, spiraling background in Vertigo.
Yeah. Like all of these things. And Raimi is so much a fan of that. When he'll have a montage of Peyton, trying to figure out the formula, you'll just see a beaker fly by the screen, superimposed with, calendars and computer images. And then when we have this hospital scene where Darkman's essential, this is his superhero origin, in which they're like, he's been burned all over his body, and we've, done this experimental treatment that is going to basically stabilize the pain that he's feeling to the point where he feels no pain. But the side effects are also that he will have enhanced adrenaline, which can make him very strong. He will also have extremely violent mood swings. And in this moment, in which Jenny Aguter's incredibly callous doctor says, like, I give him about a 7 on the Buzzard scale, which is a great line. I love this script so much. By the way, talking about the Coen brothers, they did uncredited punch-ups on this.
That does not surprise me at all. Raimi and the Coens have collaborated many, many times. Crime Wave, that's been a thing.
Sure.
They worked on Evil Dead.
Yep. But on in this moment, then we get a zoom into Peyton's eye, and we go in his head.
Yeah, you see neurons firing, and all these images that aren't meant to be literal. This is a pet peeve of mine. I just cannot stand when things are entirely literal in cinema. I just think, you're really missing the opportunity for metaphors here. When everything is literalism and realism, you're missing such opportunities for beauty and clever shorthand. I love that this movie is unafraid of doing that kind of stuff. It's certainly unafraid of homage. After Peyton Westlake escapes the hospital, there is this incredible scene, that was inspired by David Lynch's The Elephant Man, where Peyton is crawling, the most pathetic wretch, covered in bandages. He's got his new trench coat on. He's crawling through the streets in the pouring rain, and he sees Julie, Frances McDormand's character, and he comes up to her, Julie, and she freaks out because she doesn't know who she's looking at, and so she pushes him away. And there's this scene of him in an alleyway being drenched in gallons and gallons and gallons of rain after the box blows off him.
Well, yeah, you got to say the setup is that after that happens, then we fade to an overhead shot of a box in an alleyway as rain is pouring down, and as the camera slowly dollies in towards the box, the wind blows the box off to reveal Peyton huddled. He was huddled under this box, just trying to stay warm. It is so fucking sad. And it's over the top. I mean, it is over the top sad, but it knows it. It's going for that and achieving it. And then it gets to the particular homage I know you're coming to.
Yeah, well, it's the Psycho homage. As the camera pushes further and further into Peyton's face, we get up on his eye, and then we see the vortex of the storm drain superimposed over his eye, and we get this sort of motion-controlled move that moves in perfectly. And the score in that moment goes very Bernard Herrmann. And you get this wonderful Psycho homage for no other reason than that, we're experiencing a kind of death for this character. There is a part of Westlake that dies in this moment.
Yes. And he is continually trying to, eventually the story is that he is going to try and perfect the synthetic skin and get his face back. But in the meantime, because of this procedure that he's undergone, he is consumed with rage at the people that did this to him and, demands revenge. So the movie is a revenge movie, as he is slowly picking off the members of Durant's gang one by one and hoping to set them up to either be arrested or killed. There's a great, Ted, it's a Sam Raimi movie. So, Ted, brother Ted Raimi is going to be in this, and he's like a little, one of Durant's lackeys. Darkman has a wonderful Batman sequence of stalking him in an alley where, the camera whips around and you just see a shadow run by really quickly. It's like, Raimi, you're making a better Batman movie than some other Batman movies some people have made.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's this moment after Darkman captures Ted Raimi's character that they're in the sewer right under a manhole. And he's torturing him. He's putting his face in this, big, thick torrent of water. And then eventually he pushes the manhole cover aside and sticks Ted Raimi's head up into the street where all these cars are whipping past. Really incredible gag. Unfortunately, Ted Raimi's character does not survive this interaction.
He gets awesomely crunched.
Oh, that sound too. And that cut to black. Ooh, right at the perfect moment.
But then Peyton is using his synthetic skin technology to impersonate other members of the gang and frame them for stuff and get them killed. Now, granted, Darkman is a movie that you absolutely have to be on board with the cartoon take on it, because this is a movie that you could absolutely tear to shreds from a realism standpoint. You're like, wait a minute, wouldn't he have to make dentures, and how his body shape is just happens to be the same as all these people he's impersonating?
Yeah, why can't he talk without any lips? And if he doesn't have any lips, how can he impersonate everybody's voice? It's
exactly.
Silly,
It's that kind of stuff where it's like, man, I feel bad for the way you watch movies.
Right.
Like,
yeah. I think it's really easy for somebody who's pedantic to pick this thing to pieces.
Oh, yes.
But they do things like there is a scene specifically of him practicing how to mimic Durant's voice, so that by the time we cut to him mimicking Durant's voice and using those same phrases, it works. There is this wonderful scene where Westlake is impersonating Durant, and obviously they had Larry Drake play him, where fake Durant goes into a convenience store and holds up a clerk, and he looks right at the security camera and goes, Robert G. Durant, really making his name known. And so they cut to the real Robert Durant being arrested. It's a beautiful cut. Love it.
I mean, the gag is he's holding him up, and the guy's like, "Whoa, buddy, I don't want any trouble." And at the security camera, he's like, "My name's not Buddy, it's Durant, Robert G. Durant." cut to Larry Drake close up going, "Yes, I'm Robert G. Durant."
Oh, so fucking funny.
The police are arresting him. It's great. It's so good. So eventually, this does become they realize that this person's impersonating. There's a great, shoot the I can't tell which one's the real Durant moment.
Yeah.
Larry Drake getting to play Peyton Westlake playing Durant is awesome. Like, so funny. The movie's fun. Like, it manages its dark tone, because it is it's a darker movie from its horror origins and the kind of tragedy that it's dealing with, but it's also wanting to be a fun comic book movie, and my God, is it succeeding at that.
It is. Now, once this plot where Westlake is trying to get back at Durant is in motion, the movie starts to trade off on that plot and interweave the plot of Westlake trying to get back with Julie. So once Westlake figures out how to print masks from this artificial skin formula, he realizes, okay, well, they only last for about 99 minutes in the light. at that point they start to deteriorate really, really rapidly. So there are times where I can go out and see Julie, but I can only see her for a very, very limited time, and then I have to run the fuck away. And so there are several big scenes where Westlake gets to meet up with Julie again. The first one where he approaches her, there's kind of a weird transition to it. It almost feels dreamlike. It's like, ooh, what's happening here? Reminding me a little bit of the sudden transition into odd, surreal scenes, kind of like we saw in the Avengers last week. Mm-hmm. But, he meets up with Julie, and you can see in that scene, if you're watching the high def version of the film, you can see in this, moment where he's meeting up with her at the graveyard and greets her there, and she's surprised. He's wearing an appliance. Neeson's wearing an appliance on his right, just above his right cheekbone, kind of parallel to his right eye. And you're looking at that and you're going, I wonder how they're going to use that. It's probably going to bubble up. It's probably hiding an air bladder. And then they never do. And then instead they cut to the next scene of them hanging out, and they're in completely different costumes in a totally different location. And you're like, whoa, we're missing a chunk. Something happened. What's going on?
It is clear that there is something that has been cut in regards to more Frances McDormand, potentially more romantic stuff between Peyton and Julie. Now, here's the thing. I totally recognize that is being omitted. I didn't think it was debilitating. I wasn't taking notice of it as much as you were, but I would say something that we've already said. The stronger criticism is that I just don't think Julie, as written, like, there was only so far up to a point that I felt they decided they could write Julie as a character.
I agree.
Because she's fulfilling a very specific, very archetypical purpose, and Frances McDormand is doing it very well. And I do think it works, but it is at the cost of, I think, more complication between Julie and Peyton's relationship after he comes back to her from the dead.
Agreed. Now, the best scene that they share together during this whole sort of middle section of the film takes place at a carnival.
The greatest scene, maybe one of the greatest scenes of film in the 1990s.
Now, there are repeating motifs, even before this, of Westlake viewing himself as a carnival freak. The word freak is used as like an insult that makes him very enraged. There is this lovely non-diegetic shot of Liam Neeson's head on a tiny puppet as a dancer on the stage of a freak show that's used in a sequence earlier. It's like, whoa!
It's when he awakes at the hospital for the first time.
Yeah, that's right. It's one of his, I guess, coma dreams or something. But they're at the fair, and they play, the game of like, knock the 3 milk bottles over with the baseball or whatever.
Yes, and he knocks it over, and he says that he wants to get his girlfriend the pink elephant, and the horrible, disgusting, apathetic Carney is. I was getting there. I just wanted to give it more adjectives.
Okay.
He says doesn't count if you weren't behind the line, and because the procedure that he has been subjected to makes his emotions swing pretty much the highest direction. This enrages him. He's like, I want a pink elephant. We start to see his images, like, this Carney looks incredibly warped, and he even sees one of the elephants turn its head and look at him. Like, it's wonderfully nightmarish. To the point,
the Carney's looking directly into the lens. The lens gets really short. It's a really short lens, and it's right up in the fucking Carney's face, and the Carney ends up calling him a freak.
Well, and he pushes his finger on the guy's on Peyton's chest.
I love the way this sequence is cut together. It's so fucking good.
It's amazing. And then Peyton's entire world crumbles into flames, literally for him. It is a figurative mental space that he's in, but that is what we see, is the background crackles away into fire as Liam Neeson's scowling mug is just twisted with anger. And then we get maybe one of the most Evil Dead moments in the movie, in which he bends the guy's fingers back, and then we get this great, like, 1, 2, 3, basically like a 90-degree or like turnaround of the Carney screaming, Liam Neeson screaming, and Frances McDormand all screaming, just ah.
Yeah, it's so funny. And then Westlake I guess, punches or throws the guy. I forget, but there's this incredible shot of this dummy flying backward through like the Carney background, whatever backdrop they have for that, for that baseball throwing attraction, that scam that they're running. This scene rocks. It's one of my favorites in the movie. And
we get the line, take the fucking elephant.
Take the fucking elephant.
Take the fucking elephant. Look, we're going a little long because Darkman's a movie we really like and extol. I do want to get a couple things in here. Eventually, this all comes around to that Delta City, as I continually called him during our screening, but Louis Strack. It turns out that he's in bed with Robert Durant and that he ordered the hit on Peyton, and that they know that he's the one that's been causing them problems, so they need to eliminate him. So Strack is going to he's going to use Durant to kidnap Julie to draw Peyton out. We get this wonderful, awesome, super inspired by Police Story 3. Go listen to our Police Story 3 episode. Action sequence with helicopters flying all around Los Angeles.
Basically, the last couple of big sequences in this movie are homages to great Hong Kong action cinema and Mission Impossible. And at this point, this would have been an homage to the series Mission Impossible.
Well, I mean, Mission Impossible wasn't really doing this kind of stuff as a series.
Oh, but they did a lot of mask pulls in Mission Impossible.
That's true, yes. Yeah, but more so I'm talking because you think about like the big helicopter sequence in the first Mission Impossible. It's like Mission Impossible owes a debt to Darkman and more particularly HK Cinema.
Yeah.
But this entire sequence rocks. It's so fun and tactile. We get amazing stunts, including somebody really dangling off of a cable underneath a helicopter going through Los Angeles
in full Darkman costume, which could not have been comfortable.
No.
But like this helicopter sequence really does feel like the bigger sequence of it, because it's just the most scope, the most spectacle. And it is the sequence where they deal with Durant, who I think the movie kind of mishandles like which villain is really the big bad, because Durant's connection to Westlake feels more personal, and yet Durant's death feels oddly impersonal, even though it involves like a really fun helicopter explosion. It's like, oh, well, that was kind of the dynamic I was hoping would last till the final fight of the movie, because they had the best sort of back and forth, with him impersonating him and all that.
You know what? I will pull another RoboCop reference. This is Clarence Boddicker and Dick Jones. And here's the thing. In that movie, Clarence Boddicker also dies first, and then Dick Jones is dealt with. Why does it work better in that movie? Because Dick Jones as a villain had a much stronger presence throughout the movie. Because in this, it is a similar setup to where Strack is the one who ordered the hit. So he's really the one that's responsible for Peyton being like this. But the person who pulled the trigger, Durant in this instance, the Clarence Boddicker, he's the one that we want to see die nasty and hard. And,
yes.
And now, he does.
There's also a structural thing here to talk about, like how one beat plays as the climax and how the other beat plays as denouement. Dick Jones dying and RoboCop plays as like a narrative tidying up of like, oh, this is the denouement, we're wrapping things up. Whereas the Boddicker sequence is like, this is the big fucking climax of the movie. Whereas in Darkman, the helicopter sequence is great.
It feels like it in the moment, it feels like the big climax, because like there's a helicopter flying around and Darkman's crashing into skyscrapers and he's blowing up helicopters. How can it get any bigger than this? But then there is another climax.
Right. They move on really quickly from the helicopter explosion, so it doesn't really give you that sense of like, yeah, this is the one.
Yeah, you don't get to see Durant's charred corpse flying through the sky to mirror Peyton's accident or something like that. It's just like it's a cool helicopter explosion. But yes, considering that this was the villain that we were introduced to in before the credits rolled, like for that character not to be the final write-off and the final climax, it feels a little wrong. But, the sequence that we get at the end in which Peyton disguises himself as Durant and meets with Strack at the one of the buildings that they're building in their, urban redevelopment Delta City thing. It's a cool setting, but the personal stakes, even though Julie is right there and having been kidnapped, it's just not there between Peyton and Strack because they haven't shared a scene together.
Right. So yeah, that climax would have played better if it was Durant in that scene, but it's still a pretty well put together sequence. I like it.
It's very
the
fun.
rivet gun stuff is really cool. And
yeah, it's great. I mean, the entire setup, Chekhov's nail bed at the bottom of 650 feet. Gotta love that. It's great, and I like that it ends with a very pointed comic booky. The Dark Knight owes a debt to Darkman.
Sure.
Because this moment in which the bad guy is hanging upside down and it is framed, like that, where he's just like, go on, you're not going to drop me. You don't have it. Because if you do this, you'd be just like me, the usual thing. And then Darkman drops him. He's like, if you did this, you wouldn't be able to live with yourself. Closes his eyes, lets go, drops, and just, I'm learning to live with a lot of things recently.
Yeah, it's a good one-liner. And it's delivered well, and
he gets to do a cool cape swap, over the camera as he walks away. It's like, oh yes, give it to me.
Yeah, and the movie goes out on the right beat of Peyton and Julie not ending up together. I like that there is no clean, happy ending for this movie. It's the ending it earns.
It's sad. I mean, Peyton admits he's like, I was trying to save the man that I was. But then a funny thing happened along the way is that the man inside the monster started changing to be more like the monster. And I can't ask you to live with who I am and what I've done.
It's good character growth.
It is. I mean, it's a moment of it's tragic. It's a great tragedy. And then, of course, the ending of him running out into the crowd and putting on a mask and being revealed to be, oh boy, Bruce Campbell.
Sam originally wanted to be the lead of the film.
Yeah. I mean, him and Bill Paxton really wanted this role as well.
Oh, wow.
Which would have been very interesting to see him in this.
Sure.
But that ending of he just turns into, for our intents and purposes, a no one, a total stranger that can be lost in the crowd. And we get that voiceover like, I'm everyone and no one. Call me Darkman. Boom. Ending. It's like you couldn't go out on a better note.
Yeah, it's again, fantastic movie. Drew rates this as like something that he would consider pretty much flawless.
No, I gave my criticisms and I agree with some things.
That is true. Yeah.
But here's the thing, like, this is one of those movies that it's like a 5-star movie does not mean a perfect movie. A 5-star movie is that this is something that is so good at what it's doing that I could watch it practically any time. Like we watched Darkman and I'm like, you know what? I could watch Darkman again. Like I watched it tonight. Like it's that good.
It's easy to watch. It is easy to watch.
It's Raimi. I won't say at the height of his powers, but certainly at the height of his powers then. Like he had to be the highest budget he had ever worked with. And even then it was, probably relatively low for a big studio picture, but they wanted the next Batman. And I really like this period of post Batman when they didn't start making superhero movies. They just made a whole bunch of weird pulp horror movies.
Yeah, basically. So one of these days we'll do the Shadow on the show. But if you wanted to figure out, something to pair with Darkman, a pulp movie, a kind of pulp horror comic movie, maybe a classic monster movie, you'd go to the shelf. You'd pull something off the shelf and talk about it here with us on the show. It's kind of a collaborative thing. If you want to pull something off the shelf to recommend as a pairing with Darkman, go to GenreVision.com and comment on the Darkman episode there on the main page. And if you do so, we'll make sure to read your shelf pick on the next episode of the show.
So, Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Darkman?
It's a Coen Brothers movie, and it's Miller's Crossing. If you've never seen Miller's Crossing, it's another organized crime tale that takes place in an unnamed urban location. It has, one of my favorite performances, I think, in all of the Coen filmography in this one. That's it's got to be our hero, Tom.
Gabriel Byrne?
Yes, sir.
I mean, Albert Finney's so good in that.
I mean, he's incredible. That scene of him with the Tommy gun.
It's incredible. Awesome.
It's one of my favorites in their filmography. But yeah, Miller's Crossing, if you've never seen it. Probably another one of my favorite roles is this John Polito's role in that movie. Holy shit.
Oh my God, John Polito's so good in Miller's Crossing.
That scene of him in front of the fireplace. Also that scene with, what's his name? J.E. Freeman? The guy who plays Dr. Wren in Alien Resurrection.
Oh, yes. I can't remember.
Absolutely love Miller's Crossing. And there's Raimi influence in the Coen's work. There's Coen influence in Raimi's work.
Yeah.
It is two great tastes that taste great together, baby. And Drew, what are you pulling off the shelf?
I'm sorry. I can't. I mean, first of all, go listen to our Miller's Crossing. I'm sorry. I just said, like, look in your heart, Tom. so awesome. God, I want to watch Miller's Crossing now. Yeah, go listen to our Miller's Crossing episode. You already said my shelf pick. I'm picking The Shadow because not just because Darkman did start as Raimi wanting to make a movie on The Shadow, but not being able to obtain the rights and everything. And he instead, I think, did something better, which was, make his own original thing. But they did make The Shadow, starring Alec Baldwin, directed by Russell McKay, who we quite like. Go listen to our Highlander episodes. The Shadow is weird. It's another one. I would like to do it on the show someday because I've not revisited it in a long time, like maybe 10 years. But it is another one. It's like, this is bizarre. It's another one of those. I like when studios learn the wrong lesson from a movie and end up unwittingly making weird shit because they're just chasing a buck. And this is, still trying to chase that Batman dollar. But, it's got Alec Baldwin. It's got Tim Curry. I think Peter Boyle is in it as like the taxi driver. He's the taxi driver in that one. And then can't remember the taxi driver actor in the Phantom. But The Shadow's weird. It's a very bizarre movie. Probably not the best. I'm sure it's a bad iteration of the actual Shadow character, but it's weird. And I would definitely love to do it on the show one day. So if y'all want to listen to us do The Shadow, come out to the comments on GenreVision.com and convince us to do The Shadow. And we'll see about where it falls on the schedule. Well, now we have to go to the listener shelf picks for last week's episode on The Avengers from 1998. Mr. Milksteak had Geostorm, The Mighty Boosh, and Hudson Hawk, a movie I have never seen a single frame from, but I know about it and I would be interested in seeing it considering it's such a notorious bomb. JT had Batman and Robin, which I have publicly defended in a written article. Eric Fuchs went with The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and because we mentioned Godzilla, Ebra, Horror of the Deep. So that might be another one you watch, Travis. Stephen Nesbella closed things out with The Mod Squad movie, which I've also never seen a frame from, and What Dreams May Come, a wonderful movie that we did an episode on. So if you'd be interested, go check out our What Dreams May Come episode.
I don't know if I would describe it as wonderful, but it's a movie.
I was filled with wonder.
There's some wondrous stuff in it, and there's also a whole bunch of other stuff in it that doesn't age very well. But yes, watch the movie and listen to our episode on it for some fun discussion.
So thank you, everybody, for listener shelf picks. Love having these every week and look forward to having more next week. Well, we do have to do some quick calls to action, but stick around. We will be doing Currently Consuming afterwards, where we're going to be talking about another Godzilla movie, and yes, Zack Snyder's Justice League. So we did a pre-show as we do every week for the wonderful, amazing people at patreon.com/GenreVision, where we started talking about Mario, the franchise and mini games, and it kind of splintered in a couple different directions about classic video games and video games in general. But we do a weekly pre-show about pretty much any topic we want to at this point. And that is available for our premium subscribers at patreon.com/GenreVision. For just $5 a month, you can become a premium subscriber. You will get access to the hours and hours and hours and hours of additional content, including those weekly pre-shows, extended monthly Currently Consumings, some other bonus material for all these GenreVision network of shows. So if that sounds like something that you want to get in on, go to patreon.com/GenreVision.
If you'd like to find other ways to support the show, one of the best ways you can do so is to give us a rating and a review on the Apple Podcast Store. Using your Mac, your PC, your iOS device, head to the podcast store and search for GenreVision. There you can give us a star rating and a brief review. If you do so, we promise to feature it on the next episode of the show.
So let's do some Currently Consuming.
Num 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 num.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
Tell you what, let's do the big thing up front. Let's mention the big 800-pound 4x3 gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
All right.
The 4-hour gorilla in the room. Yes, I have experienced, witnessed Zack Snyder's Justice League. I wrote a review for it, which we will link to on the in the post for this episode at GenreVision.com. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it because if you read my review, you'll see I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because I thought it was okay. I think it's certainly a cohesive movie, more so than its theatrical cut. I will boil down my take on Zack Snyder's Justice League this way. A car can run exceptionally well, but you can dislike the aesthetic of the car That's how I feel about that movie. It works. I can't deny that it works at what it's trying to do. I'm just not really into what it's doing. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, I watched about, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes of it up until the Wonder Woman introductory scene when I decided that I just, I bailed because the truth is I just don't enjoy what Zack Snyder's interpretation of these characters are. It's
nope.
It's repellent to me. I don't get it.
I just think it's, my big argument, and I say it in my review, is that I just think it's one of the more unimaginative things that you can do with these incredibly imaginative characters.
Yes, there's a lot of potential for these characters to go all sorts of interesting and fun places, and Zack Snyder just really likes to do things that I think you and I consider pretty boring with them.
Yeah. So I really don't have a whole ton else to say, but if you do want to hear my extended thoughts, we will link to that review in the show notes. But let's hop over and talk about another movie that is also a big, I would say, experimental for the franchise that it's dealing with. I know you've watched another Godzilla movie.
I did. Well, at your recommendation, I watched Godzilla vs. Biollante, which was a 1989 movie that followed the 85 reboot of the series. So it's the second Heisei Godzilla movie.
Mm-hmm. But you watched I did not recommend you watch the dub version. You watched the dub version, but
it's the only one I could find in the quality that I wanted. So I watched the dubbed version. Now, this isn't like the kind of treatment that a lot of the Godzilla movies got, where they were brought over to the US and Americanized and recut and reshot. This did not happen with Godzilla versus Biollante. This is basically the same cut of the film, just dubbed.
Yes.
Now, there are some chunks in the movie that aren't originally in Japanese at all. So I feel like this is, as a dub version, works better. And boy, oh boy, I really liked most of this movie. I liked how weird it got. There's this like psychic daughter thing, the psychic daughter from the plant scientist who dies, and her soul ends up in the giant Biollante plant monster. And oh boy, I got to crack another seltzer to talk about this moment. At the end of the movie, like after Biollante is defeated, her giant head appears in the sky like she's fucking Mufasa. It is incredible. And also there's just some like great goopy monster fighting. Like Godzilla gets fucked up in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Biollante puts these like nasty barbed plant vine tentacles through his hands and shit. Like it's good goopy monster fighting. And I'm not normally one for these movies. Kaiju movies are kind of a tough sell for me. I'm just not all that into them.
No,
but this is a pretty good one.
This might be my favorite Godzilla movie. It's tough because the original is such like an untouchable classic, but it's such a different movie than the franchise is. It set the bar, but starting from the very first sequel onwards, it changed what Godzilla kind of was. Mm-hmm. And what people expected. Like people began to expect something from a Godzilla movie. And in that regard, it's maybe this or maybe Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. But probably this. I like that like the way that it's filmed is very different than a lot of the Godzilla movies, even after this. It has kind of that an interesting horror tone. Like there's a whole lab sequence where like weird vine monsters are attacking people.
It reminded me a little bit of that one sequence from the pilot of the recent Swamp Thing reboot that takes place in the morgue, actually. Sure. So yeah, there is some kind of like Audrey 2 plant monster horror a little bit.
I love the design of Biollante. I think it's one of the undersold gods. I can't believe that Biollante hasn't made it's the only Biollante appearance like in any of the regular films. Like,
yeah, it hasn't been redesigned at all. It is a really interesting design because it's basically half plant, half Godzilla, but has the soul of a psychic daughter inside of it.
Yes.
Which is insane.
I like it even before it becomes, I like it when it's just this giant rose in the middle of a lake. It's such a cool, surreal image.
It is, yeah. Although they have a really hard time hiding the human silhouette, and that basically just looks like somebody wearing a giant rose on their head.
I love it. I like Godzilla's design in this one. I think it's the good balance between he still looks like the big G, but he's got a little bit of a mean face.
Yeah, Godzilla looks really good in this movie. Yep.
Yeah.
And I like that this looks like... this looks the most like what kind of shows, like Super Sentai Rangers, that kind of show.
Oh, Tokusatsu.
Yeah, this looks most like a Tokusatsu show, out of any Godzilla movie I've seen. And I like that that particular aesthetic. I think they pull it off well in this film.
You might like some more of the Heisei movies. We'll see. We'll see if I can convince you to watch some more. But yeah, Godzilla vs. Biolines, that needs so much more restoration and love over here.
Absolutely.
It's really, really good. I'll say I have something else, but I think I'm going to save it for our monthly currently consuming because it's something that filled me with a ton of joy. And normally we do a lot of joyous currently consuming on those monthly episodes.
Sweet. You'll hear that over at patreon.com/GenreVision. We do one of those every month. And we include some interesting gems and deeper cuts on these usually. So again, if you want to check that out along with the pre-shows, that's patreon.com/GenreVision.
And now we're going to wrap things up with our
Comment of the Week.
Whatever's going on in the comments, y'all keep doing it. These last couple episodes, y'all have just been having wonderful conversations and lengthy conversations that I look forward to seeing every week.
And somehow an immense bomb like the Avengers 1998 has, as we sit here, 50 comments, which for our website is like pretty big.
It's very big for us.
Yeah.
So I'm so in love with everything that y'all are doing in the comment section. So y'all are making it really difficult week to week. But I did want to point out Mr. Milksteak, because this is just the ones that this just made me laugh the most. Some random thoughts that I wrote down while listening to this episode. 1, the Uma Thurman Emma Peel clone in The Avengers. Tuma Thurman. Great. Love it. And then the other one is all of the fainting in The Avengers gave me the idea for a new British crime drama called Faint Praise. Wonderful title. About a small town priest who suddenly starts seeing clues for unsolved cases every time he passes out and decides to use this gift to help the police in his community. 3 6-episode seasons starring Patty Considine. Is that how you say that?
Patty Considine, yeah.
Yeah, Considine. Okay. Starring Patty Considine as the priest. I'll take my BAFTA TV award now. Thank you. Yes. First of all, faint praise, and that being the premise is so brilliant, Mr. Milksteak. And then there was just a wonderful pun thread that went on that I will not spoil. You have to go read. That is very funny. Y'all are just killing it in the comments. I love this so much. I can't wait to see the comments for this week's episode. But we will be concluding March Madness, our ode to mad scientist movies, with what's got to be one of the weirder movies we'll ever have done, and one that both Travis and I have never seen. We're doing Tammy and the T-Rex next week.
Yeah, we're doing the gore cut, or the R-rated cut,
yes,
of Tammy and the T-Rex, which is a movie about Paul Walker playing a dude whose consciousness gets transferred into a robotic Tyrannosaurus Rex and then comes back to visit his girlfriend, played by Denise Richards. It is as strange as it sounds, and you can watch it on Shudder.
What's I'm having a terrible, it's Terry something. The actor from Weekend at Bernie's who plays the mad scientist.
I wouldn't know by name, but I'm sure it's Terry something.
Yeah, well, we'll find out next week when we do Tammy and the T-Rex. So come back for the conclusion of March Madness. As always, want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Dietsch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on GenreVision.